The Detroit Lions surprised a lot of people last season by making it to the NFC Championship game. There'll be no sneaking up on anyone this year, especially after Sports Illustrated picked the Lions to win the Super Bowl. I don't recall that ever happening in my lifetime. To talk about the upcoming season, we call on our friend and legendary Zealand quarterback Tim Twentyman. He's the Lions insider for Lions.com. Tim, what makes you think that this team can handle these expectations?
Legendary, really, Jack? Legendary? That's not the term most people use for that. But no, to answer your question, you just look at this roster and what they've done. And really, to me, it's what they've added, right? I mean, offensively, this team was top 5 in the league last year in rushing. They were top 5 in league in passing. That's hard to do. And they bring back most of those pieces, if not all those main core pieces. So you knew they were going to be better offensively, right? The question was, how much could they improve defensively? And to me, that was going to be the difference if you can take the next step. You know, they were 19th in total defense. They were 23rd in points allowed, and they were 27th against the pass. So what did GM Brad Holmes do? He went out and traded for Carlton Davis Jr. He got Amik Robertson in free agency, and then he drafted Terry Arnold, Ennis Rakestraw Jr., really revamped that cornerback room, added guys like DJ Reader and Marcus Davenport to maybe help Aiden Hutchinson put a little bit more pressure. And what they hope that all equates to is a much better pass defense. And I think if they improve that part of the team, that's where the excitement comes, because we've seen that in training camp so far. We've seen that, a little bit in the preseason, but not so much from the starters. You guys are going to be excited to see, what we saw all through training camp is that kind of revamped secondary, that revamped defense. Look, they won the scrimmage to end training camp against the offense. And like we talked about, this is a pretty good offense. And so they're much better there. And I think that's why everybody in Allen Park is pretty excited about where this team can go.
Yeah, Brad Holmes was asked, what's the goal? He said, win the Super Bowl. Is that what the players want to hear? Or does that weigh on them a little more?
No, I don't think so. I think they know the expectations. When you make it to the NFC Championship game, and a lot of the guys in that locker room view that as, look, you give San Francisco credit for winning the football game. They made the plays, but Detroit looks at that game and sees, a Jahmyr Gibbs fumble, sees a couple drops by Josh Reynolds, the opportunity that they let slip through their hands. Not so much San Francisco beating them, but they make any number of those plays themselves, and they probably win that game. And so they know they have the roster to do it. You look at all their core players, all their best pieces. They're all under 25 years old, and now they've got that experience. And so that's very much been the topic of conversation here at the Meyer Performance Center is Super Bowl. And look, I've been covering this team for 16 years. That has not always been the case. That's rarely been the case. And so it's been fun to kind of follow this journey all off season, now through training camp. Now there are expectations. You mentioned Sports Illustrated, and I think the players, the coaches, and everyone in Allen Park is really embracing that.
Yeah, Tim, the Lions spent a lot of money in the offseason. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jared Goff. How important was it to keep those guys in place, and did they overspend on Goff?
Well, not if you're seeing some of those contracts that are coming out now and some of the quarterbacks and obviously with some of the wide receivers. And so, again, it's Brad Holmes, perfect timing, right? Getting it right. Jack, where it's big is it's in the locker room, right? I mean, when you look at Amon-Ra St. Brown, a guy who's a 4th-round pick, who all he's done is put his head down, done the work, made the plays, stays after, catches 202 balls after every practice, and did it on the field. And so he gets rewarded. Penei Sewell, one of the best young tackles, who's only 23, by the way, and comes to work every day, puts his head down, and is rewarded. That reverberates through the locker room. Guys see that, especially young guys that are like, okay, I want to be next, and so, they'll go to work like those guys. And so not only are those guys now your most expensive players, your highest paid players, but they're your hardest workers. And so when those two things correlate, I think you've got a terrific situation.
Yeah, you start losing locker room leaders, you're in trouble. Let's talk Dan Campbell. Will he continue to roll the dice, or do you think he'll dial it back at all this year, or is it just who he is?
Jack, do you really expect Dan to roll it back? I mean, we've known Dan now going into 4 years. No, that's kind of his style, right? He's an aggressive football coach who has a ton of trust in his football team, and he's going to err on the aggressive side. Now that being said, you've got a kicker in Jake Bates who has got a little bit bigger leg than some of the guys that we've had here in previous years. Will that change his mind maybe if this is a 55, 56, 57-yard field goal, where last year, a couple years before, that was an automatic 4th and 2, 4th and 3. You're either going for it or you're punting it. Maybe that decision changes a little bit, but don't expect much change from Dan Campbell. He's an aggressive head coach. He's going to stay that way, and that's how this team got to where it's at, and so I don't see it changing.
We've seen this script play out before. A hungry fan base gets a taste of it. They get all excited. The Lions could do no wrong last year. If they start slowly, do you see this fan base possibly turning on them?
Nah, I don't think so. I mean, if you were at those playoff games last year, and if you were at even the preseason game, Jack, it was crazy last week against Pittsburgh. I mean, they sold out standing room only for the 3rd preseason game. I mean, they were causing false start penalties in the 4th quarter of a preseason game. I think they are behind this football team. They're behind their head coach. Look, it's a harder schedule, and there's expectations. We talked about that. And look, there's going to be a rough patch in any point in the season. We saw it even last year. But this fan base has been so hungry for a winner, and now they have one, and they have the core young players that I'd be really shocked if this team got off to a bad start or had a long lull. Like I said, you're going to have some streaks here and there, but this is just too good of a football team. It's too good of a roster, and it's too good of a coaching staff for me to think that they're going to get off to a slow start or really struggle. And even if they do, I think this fan base is going to be behind them because of what they did last year and what Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes are building and what the future looks like with all this young talent on this football team.
Well, Tim, I hope it's half as fun as it was last year. If it is, we're in for another great one here in Detroit and around the state of Michigan. Tim, thanks for joining us. As always great to talk to you, especially before these seasons begin.
Yeah, it should be a fun one.